Welcome to the Exes and Babies podcast, covering the good, bad, and the ugly of co-parenting. I'm your host, Sydney Swonigan, aka the Co-Parent Whisperer. Let's get into it. Hello, everyone. Good to see you. As you know, I've been doing some solo episodes so we can just drill into some tools and tips that will help you with your co-parenting. Last time we talked about cleaning your slate when you're starting off your co-parenting. What do you have to do to kind of reset your energy with your co-parent, reset your energy for yourself? There's a lot of unlearning and transformation that's required and forgiveness and what have you. So we talked about that. Go ahead and check that one out if you haven't seen it. But today we're going to talk about two of them, actually. Grace and empathy. So taking a step back, co-parenting is like being on a team. People, if you've been in my world, if you've been following, I love to use a team as a way to help people think about how to navigate their co-parenting relationship, because we've all been on a team, whether it's been a professional team or a sports team or a work team. We've all been on some form of a team. And, there's been people on our teams that we don't like. Maybe we've done a class project growing up and there's that one person who didn't do the work, or maybe you're that person. Maybe I'm that person. I think there might have been a time where I wasn't the most active on a team. But however, there's someone on your team, you don't like them, but you can still get the work done, right? So even if hopefully maybe you do still like your co-parent to some degree, you liked them at some point in theory, but even if you don't like them, you can still co-parent with them. You don't have to like each other and be best friends and love the ground that they walk on to co-parent well. What you need to co-parent well are some principles, a team culture, defining the vision. What is your vision as co-parents? And so I'm going to talk about, we'll do an episode on vision, how to talk about a vision and your values for your kids. So that you can always go back to that when you get off track, because you're going to get off track. Things are going to come up that are going to make it hard sometimes to navigate the co-parenting piece. However, if you go back to that North Star of what kind of humans are we raising? What is our shared alignment, and trying to make sure that they have a happy whole childhood and have, great relationships when they grow up and things like that. So we'll cover that in another episode. But today we're going to talk about grace and empathy, because I do feel like that one can get lost, especially early on when you're in the midst of severing that relationship, that romantic relationship. Maybe there's some anger, some resentment, some frustration there. That's when the grace and empathy is going to be even harder to tackle there. But when you're on a team of any sort, there's importance to have grace. There's some importance when it comes to having empathy. And that's because we're all human. We're all going to make mistakes, right? And when you know that you're in a space where you can't make mistakes, that's going to be used against you in court. That's going to be used against you to say you're not a good parent and things like that. It's hard for you to show up as a good teammate. And so you don't feel safe. You can't do your best work. And you won't take risks. I don't know what kind of risks you need to take in parenting, but I'm sure there are some. I just haven't thought of it. But, you can't do your best work when you feel like you're going to be scrutinized. And so that extending grace to your co-parent and them doing the same for you is so important, because chances are you haven't raised a bunch of children before. You don't have extensive experience raising jillions of children, right? And even then, each child is different. Each decade that you're raising those children in are different. The expectations of a parent change over time. And so I'm just going to assume that you're not perfect at this, and therefore you're going to make some mistakes. And it's so important for you guys to extend grace, because you guys are new at this. And it's nice to be able to say, hey, I'm actually struggling to get them to go to bed. Do you have some tips? What's been working over at your household? The safety and the grace needed for someone to have that vulnerable exchange, it needs to be there. It needs to be It needs to be there. It needs to be valued. It needs to be prioritized. And that's for the benefit of your children, too. So not only for your teammate, the other co-parent, and for yourself, but for your children. If you aren't able to have those safe conversations where you know there's going to be grace and understanding, you can't be vulnerable. You're not going to feel comfortable being vulnerable, saying like, hey, I'm sucking at this over here and I need a little help. What are you doing, right? That takes vulnerability. And it benefits the children for you to be able to open up and have that, conversation between the two of you. And that can be, hey, this is off North Star, blue skies. Like, I know that this can be really challenging, especially if you had a really, really challenging divorce or what have you, or a really challenging custody battle, especially since a lot of people feel that in order to win in court, right? It's not just they're feeling it, they're also encouraged. Their lawyers, the system, in order to get a certain amount of time that you might think is right for your children, you have to say why they shouldn't have that time. And therefore, what do they suck at? How are they bad as a parent, right? You're being forced and encouraged to look for the flaws in that other person. And that's not an example of grace, right? That's not going to create a safe team environment when you spent all this time looking for those flaws, or you felt like that was happening to you. Now you're scared if your kid does a normal thing like bump their head because you're like, oh my gosh, how's that going to be used against me in court? When really you should just be able to focus on your children in that moment, right? Instead of like, oh my God, how is this going to, impact my ability to see my children, I can just focus on, what my kid needs. And so that's going to take some trust, right? That's going to take some time and some direct communication around like, hey, let's try to give each other grace. Even if, we had been in that space of basically being at war, unfortunately, because again, that's how the court system's pretty much set up right now. That's the energy of it. That's the examples we've had. You're going to have to move into and give yourselves grace, because it might take some time to move into a space where you can give each other grace, give yourself grace, because you're going to need it. You're going to need it. Parenting is hard. Co-parenting is also very hard. And so you need grace. And so I highly encourage y'all to think about that. It's so easy to be like, oh my God, they're so bad at this. Maybe it makes you feel good to know that you're better at something. But extending grace is so important. We're all going to make mistakes. So the other one is empathy. And that I'm doing those together because they run together, right? In order to have a little bit of grace, sometimes you need empathy. Like, I have struggled with that with our children, or I've struggled with something with our children before. I can put myself in your shoes and understand why that'd be so challenging for you. And even though it's not challenging for me, I can understand that that could be challenging for you and that you might be feeling away and that might suck. And by me being able to do that, it does a lot. It unlocks a number of things. One thing is it reminds me that my co-parent is human. And it allows me to create space in my mind for, hey, maybe they're not actually trying to be bad at this, or maybe they just need a little support. Maybe they're just struggling, or maybe they're just going through something right now. But by me being able to do that, it allows me to not hold as much frustration against them or have as much concern or things that aren't necessarily always helpful for, parenting and co-parenting. And so having that empathy, because you want it back. A lot of this is like, you also want empathy coming back to you, right? Maybe you have a bad day. Okay, I'm just going to assume we all have bad days. We all have bad days, and maybe a lot of things are happening, and so we're dropping our kid off to the other parent late. And of course, you want a little grace from that co-parent. You want the one that you're dropping your child off to late. Sorry, trying to keep the example clear, but you want a little grace from them, right? And you want a little empathy because, you didn't mean to. Chances are you didn't mean to. And by being able to extend that empathy and also get it in return, you guys, again, can do better work. You can do better work. You can actually focus on solving the problems more so than getting caught up into the emotional labor of like, man, they keep messing up or they suck at this, right? And so empathy, we want it. We expect it sometimes, right? And then it needs to be given back. Now, please understand, when I say grace and empathy, that doesn't mean not holding each other accountable. That doesn't mean like guilting, and shaming your other co-parent. Well, can you have a little empathy for me? If you know that you need to get your ish together and that you're having trouble with something, ask for help, renegotiate, whatever it is. Maybe it's you agreed to be able to take your children to soccer every Wednesday, but work keeps running over and it's really hard to get them there. You're going to want to be able to have someone be able to put themselves in your shoes, to have that empathy, and then also and what have you. But you also need to be able to hold yourself accountable. Maybe you need to, redirect or come up with another plan. But by you guys having empathy, I think you can problem solve a lot better. And so I've really appreciated it when my co-parent has had empathy for my situation. There's been times where I'm having a hard time at work or in life. Life is happening regardless of what kind of co-parenting you're doing, right? And so, I was having a hard time, feeling pretty sad, and he offered to have Dior an extra day, and that was really nice for him to feel seen and not in a way that was going to be used against me later on. And that meant my kid's needs got to be met, or he got to hang out with a parent who's in a certain place mentally. And so that has benefited me. And same with my ex. I have great empathy for him. I know that he didn't have a certain upbringing. And so sometimes that means he's learning a lot in terms of how to show up emotionally for our child. It might mean he struggles with understanding the importance of getting certain services offered to our children because he didn't have those services growing up consistently. And so I try to have empathy. I try to, as much as I can, put myself in his shoes. He doesn't know sometimes what the expectations can be for a parent, especially if you didn't have your needs met as a child, a lot of them. And so, or a number of them or what have you. But I said to say by me having that empathy, that means I might sometimes be doing a little bit more educating at times. And that might be frustrating, but at the end of the day, my kid is going to be better off for it. So my ability to empathize with him and recognize that, he's not trying to not do certain things. He just doesn't know the value of it. He hasn't experienced that for himself. He hasn't been exposed to that. And so I can problem solve around that. We can problem solve together to solve for that issue. So, yeah. Well, that is all I have on those topics. Again, these are some principles that you can use for your co-parenting experience. Talk with your co-parent about this. What are some other principles and values that you guys want to live by when it comes to your team dynamic? Because no team wins just by being together. You have to be intentional. You have to be thoughtful about how are we going to get the work done? How are we going to navigate challenges? How are we going to act and behave and think when we're with each other and when we're trying to problem solve or parent our children? So again, this is just a continuation of thinking about things to incorporate in your plan. Write it out. Share with your co-parent. Hey, I've been learning some things. I think we already do some of these things well. Call it out if you're doing things well already. We do this really well. We have a lot of grace for each other. Let's keep that energy and let's be intentional about being thoughtful about other principles that we need to incorporate for our dynamic. So good luck out there. I know it's not easy. And of course, there's other resources. Go to exesandbabies.com to find events and resources that you can use to take things to the next level if you're ready to go further. And then also we have coaching, of course. I coach co-parents. And so, yeah, thank you and good luck. Thank you for watching. Please click like, subscribe, and share.